Realized we only had a little bit of time to go over some things with it. So I did want to make sure we throw out before jumping into the soapstone if there were any things that were going on that you wanted questions about. Example, fourth period, we spent some time talking about Mr. Antolini, because folks always have kind of questions that are going on with that scene and whatnot. And they go, well, Mr. Kane, what happened? And my answer is, I don't know. Can't tell you. Emily seems disappointed in that response from me. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, no one knows. And it's not like, English teacher brotherhood or coming to his defense. I tend to probably kind of side with him a little bit more because of Holden's tendency to exaggerate, certainly with things. And I kind of picture him where that there's a kid who's in line for some kind of great big fall, and you see him and you just kind of feel bad and pat him on the head. Now, I have no plans of sitting next to Johnny's desk and patting him on the head or anything like that. The fact that he goes to his English teacher's apartment, while not typical, isn't like completely unusual, especially for 1940s, 1950s, and things like that with that prep school, because it is a different kind of environment or setup. Now, under no circumstances will Emily be like knocking on my door at any time. But for like in college, I could see you like literally getting invited to a professor's place for like a holiday party or whatever. It happens and stuff like that. Probably not every single professor or whatnot, but those for that era, that's not a completely out of the ordinary thing. But there's still certainly some wiggle room where you don't know. Yeah, I mean, they're coming back from party, or Holden's coming from when they were just having a party and whatnot. So so that's one of those things that kind of adds that level of gray that we don't really know what's going on. Someone brought up in fourth period where there's the line where it talks about, I was just admiring, and it kind of goes like ... which is fairly okay. What's going on there? You have the part then after Holden leaves where I probably was just kind of making a bigger deal than it is. So there's arguments that are certainly kind of going both ways with it. I don't think there's anywhere in the book where you could go, this is definitively what's going on. Anything else? Good. Guess what? The SATs are getting a pre-coded label. So Ka doesn't get to spend 15 seconds to just bubble in her name, whereas Alexandra has to do a whole thing. Or Johnny wondering how to spell his last name. Johnny B. JP. We're still going to get into some more details with the book by us kind of going through the soapstone, so that's why I'm not worried about us kind of moving on here a little bit. Tell you what, take like 4 or 5 minutes. I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of time, but take like 4 or 5 minutes. Take a look at the soapstone and start filling in ones that you feel pretty good about. So it doesn't mean you have to start at S and work your way all the way through occasion, audience, purpose, and whatnot. But take a look at some, and the ones that you feel pretty confident about, start filling out. I did put a couple notes on there, so like for speaker, you're not going to put J.D. Salinger, you're going to put some characteristics that would go with it. I'm not worried about you describing Holden as the speaker, because that can be a little bit confusing with this book since you do have a first-person narrator. Think of the speaker as being the author. Think of the era as when the author would be writing it, which is basically the same time that the scene would be, the setting would be taking place. For purpose, still kind of think about one-word verbs. As to what you think Salinger is trying to do. A lot of times you can take the purpose and you can take the subject and kind of meld those two together. So his purpose is to highlight purpose, and then subject, what is it that he's trying to highlight? Expose, reveal, educate, persuade, and you can kind of think of those as being a tandem. Take a few minutes, I'll let you start with it, and then we'll go over to try to figure out what we're trying to do here with a book that doesn't seem to have a whole lot of plot. I realize you don't have this in front of you, unless you're Mina. She does, because she's special. You don't have this in front of you, but you do have this in your course syllabus, and it's not that you need to turn to it, but here's kind of what we're looking at. Next week, you're going to be taking a look with your TWA, which is going to be a little bit of a DRQ / analysis taking place. Write a well-organized essay rationalizing how Holden's delusion or eccentric behavior may or not be judged as reasonable. The next part, explain the significance of that madness to the work as a whole. So whether or not you agree or disagree with Holden's behavior is going to end up being inconsequential, because the main thing that you're still going to have to do is explain, well, why is that behavior still really important within the message that Salinger's trying to get across? And so that's where this purpose idea really ends up becoming pretty critical for us. And I realize, again, I'm jumping ahead to next week. What I don't want anyone kind of putting down for what's the purpose of the behavior and all that stuff is, well, it makes the novel more interesting to read. It's like a crap answer. So, what would be like a specific purpose behind it? And that's where this is going to kind of start helping us with next week. Now, not meaning we have to go into purpose, but what are some things that feel good about so far as, okay, I think this is the audience, or I think this is tone, subject, speaker, any of those things. What do we have? Okay, so for speaker with Salinger. So, World War II veteran soldier who does suffer from PTSD. He does go into a mental hospital, as do many soldiers post World War II, before coming back to the United States to deal with issues experienced during war. So yeah, that's going to be something.
He's a school dropout.
Does end up graduating high school, but yeah, kind of like drops out, kind of switches schools, and then college also, kind of doing dropout. So academics, not something that is exactly his favorite thing, especially when it comes to formal education. Does a lot of dropouts, has some criticism that certainly would be taking place. What else? And yeah, taking a look, well, first of all, Alex, when you say children, do you have like an age group in mind? Okay. So like that adolescent, like preteen to early teen kind of thing. So we'll just kind of write like middle school age. But you do certainly have that little caption from up above that he states in 55, which is just a few years after it gets published. I'm aware that many of my friends will be saddened and shocked, or saddened over some of the chapters in the caption to write. Some of my best friends are children. In fact, all of my best friends are children. It's almost unbearable for me to realize that my book will be kept on the shelf out of their reach. So the idea there would be, yeah, he's expecting, he's hoping, he's wishing that adolescent children will read it. Doesn't mean the audience has to be solely 100% children. There can be some other parts to it. But certainly the children audience might have a different purpose than what we would also kind of throw in for the adult audience. So depending upon who you're looking at that target audience, that purpose, that subject matter could certainly vary.
For audience, I said anyone affected by grief or loss.
Regardless of age.
Yeah.
So anyone who would be affected by, you said grief or depression?
Yeah.
And the nice thing with you using the word affected, that doesn't even have to mean the one who's experiencing it.
Yeah.
So if you are a relative, if you're a close friend or someone who is unfortunately dealing with one of those circumstances, could be an opportunity for you to kind of get a little bit of an understanding, a preview of what the person could be experiencing. Okay. 1940s, 50s. Is there anything that we associate with post-World War II? I mean, you were not alive in the 1940s or 50s. Surprisingly, I was not alive in the 40s or 50s. But anything that, like, with that time, then think of? post-Great Depression. What else? Which is important, the fact that it's coming post-Great Depression. So not only do you have military superpower post World War II, but you have economic power. So, and this is big, especially after Great Depression, when there's a lack of resources. Now there's an abundance of it. So you have a lot more kind of materialism, consumerism is starting to take place. Kitchens are now getting refrigerators and TV dinners. There's TVs in houses and all that kind of stuff that may not have been there before. You do, yeah. As early as the late 1940s, early 50s, Cold War certainly does begin. So I'll put Cold War over here next to World War II. So Holden's a communist with his red hunting hat. I think the fact that you do end up having this boom in economics and manufacturing and things like that does end up being very significant for a speaker or writer who's coming back from World War II. Why? And imagine someone literally walking in here 4 minutes ago who has just come from, whether it is being in areas of civil war, say you're still in the Congo in Africa, which has been having ongoing civil war for decades. You've just come back from, some kind of military conflict, Iran, Saudi Arabia, or whatnot. You walk in, and what's the first conversation that takes place? I hate it when those Android phones get involved in my iPhone blue bubble conversation. What's going to be the reaction of the person who's coming back from?
I just sacrificed everything and you're worried about that.
And honestly, what would be one of the first words that would be kind of coming in a person's head about people who are having this kind of conversation? What a bunch of snobs, phonies, which Holden starts using over and over again. So in some ways, can Holden be a mouthpiece for this person? Yeah, you take a look at everything that's going on. We're talking about people in prep schools. You're worried about, where you're going to be going in a few years, these Joe Harvard-looking kind of guys, and you're worried about, going to the plays and the lunts and all that kind of stuff. That can certainly cause a little bit of a conflict for a person who would be coming back from that. And Emily's absolutely right. With the World War II, he's writing it during that time too. So you're kind of getting these little breaks that are happening from conflict. Okay, now I'm going to focus on my story. Whether or not you intended to kind of have that World War II voice, I think is inconsequential, because if that's what's going on in your life, that's going to impact the writing, no matter what, whether you want it to or not. What else? What don't we have yet? We don't have. Anyone else for audience, do you think? We got children, we have adults, we have affected by grief or depression. Any other specifics in audience you want to put?
I think that we could kind of add generally lost people, or people that don't know where they want to go or how to go.
Okay. So those who are kind of lost or, a wayward soul, or not exactly sure what that direction is in life. I think a group, and this would certainly fall under adults, but I think a group to specifically include would be parents. Anything else want to add for the top three? We got a pretty good list. And then we. As part of an audience? Yeah. And honestly, with like Shays, I think Virginia's and Shays probably could be one that kind of goes together, in some ways. That if you're coming back to a world and things are completely different for you, you certainly could have a feel of lost or wayward or not sure where to fit in, where do you pick up, and all of those kinds of things. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty good extensive list at that part. Now, the bottom ones. These take a little more work. What do you think? If you do have a purpose, I would say what your subject matter is along with it, or if you have subject matter, well, what is it that you think he's trying to do with that specific thing? So I think those are the two to kind of tag team together here a little bit. What do we have? Besides a whole lot of blank.
I was gonna say, purpose was to kind of highlight the subject, how you can fall down, like how you're starting the whole really easily,
Okay.
like following that kind of that is the whole.
So I don't want to try to change the answer or anything. You like kind of highlight how easy it is for it to happen, or how? Okay. So highlight in some ways kind of like the easiness of being stuck in the hole of depression. Okay. And yesterday, us kind of talking about wanting to protect the kids from falling down and all that kind of stuff would certainly work well with that whole idea.
It demonstrates dealing with teams.
Oh, let's do something besides demonstrates.
You don't like demonstrates?
Yeah.
Alright, example size.
I know you said loss.
Like-
For the subject, I know you said something with loss. I forget the word.
Dealing with loss.
Dealing with loss. Okay. So. Kind of like the hardship of dealing with loss?
Yeah.
Okay.
It sympathizes with people who feel as though they don't belong.
Okay. So purpose is to sympathize. Those who you said belong, who don't feel like they belong in the AP group chat.
It advises adolescents while at the same time criticizes growing up.
That's a lot to write. That's why I got a smart board. Lets me do stuff. Let's see if I can get this thing. Oh, that's not what I wanted. There we go. You said epitomize adolescence. That's an easy one. And then criticize. What was that again?
Growing up or like coming of age.
Okay. Well, criticize like not adults who don't understand. Okay. So I'm putting criticize adults for not recognizing. I'll just put like kind of like adolescence, the whole coming of age and that sort of thing. You could also, and certainly you could have criticized. You could even kind of switch that purpose to educate, to teach. To kind of make aware, create awareness would be something that you could certainly do as well. I certainly can't fit any more on there, but any other purposes that you think would work pretty well, or subject matter. Exam and still like even not trying to bring it all back to the prompt or anything. It is kind of a bit of an unknown, so investigate, examine, kind of explore it, create awareness for it, bring up ideas that would kind of deal with it. So those would all certainly be things to take a look at, whether it be depression, anxiety, any kind of mental illness, things along those lines. Think about tone. And again, I think depending upon what you decide to use as a purpose or subject, that tone could kind of vary with it. So if we are going with Emma's second one, where criticize adults for not recognizing, the difficulties of adolescence, it might be a little more of a critical tone as opposed to something else. Gloomy. Emma, you had judgmental.
Casual.
Yeah. Which I think that's an important one when you're dealing with some pretty heavy topics. That it probably, well, from my vantage point, I think it would help kind of make it a little bit more relatable or something that is an everyday issue as opposed to being, an overly academic kind of tone or something along those lines. Do you have one? Just irritated? Yeah.
Sarcastic.
It is sarcastic, sure. And like kind of with that comes a little bit of humor, in some ways. Cynical. Virginia, do you have one too?
Kind of similar. Critical.
Okay. And I would expect these to be the dominant ones. What if, like, say when Phoebe speaks? Any kind of different tone.
Sad,
Okay.
upset.
Kind of like a sympathetic, empathetic. I want to try to stay away from like sad, happy. Sympathetic, empathetic. What do you think about this one? Refreshing.
I think Phoebe is refreshing. She's a refreshing contrast to Holden because he really gets kind of calm. It's nice to see some maturity.
If I say the same thing after first period.
Like
Real bad. And without having Holden, Phoebe probably don't think the same way about Phoebe without having Holden to compare her to, and even kind of vice versa with it. So she herself can be kind of refreshing. You were shaking your head, and then I'll.
I mean, like, kind of, but also, like, I think, like, I do see, like, where the maturity comes in, but in the same sense, like, you still see Holden just a mess the whole time. So
Mhm.
it's just kind of like, oh, she's awesome, we love Phoebe, but, like,
And
there.
And kind of my fault. I didn't mean this solely to be with Phoebe. So far as like the refreshing, because it's a term that was getting used a lot when people were reading it within like the 50s, the 60s. That this was kind of like a refreshing book to come across. I don't think that means the content matter is. Oh, yes, I've been waiting for a book about this, my whole entire life.
You could say it's refreshing compared to other books because, like, other books, they don't really see the bad. It shows the actual downside of them.
Okay, where we try to like champion, the positive and where like not that like say for comparison's sake, East of Eden is all positive, but like Cal's gonna be okay at the very end. Marlowe, who knows? That might be a little bit different, but there's not the classic, and everything's gonna be perfectly okay when it's all said and done.
I
Right?
think kind of going along with what I seem to understand from Morgan's, a lot of books build up the popular and the wealthy, and I don't know, in my opinion, that's extremely overrated, so I appreciate how in this he's like, not to say that all popular people are horrible people, but it's like, hey, there are other people who are good people, and not as much building up.
Well, and with that Holden should be one of those people. You know, like, so when he's being critical of, you know, the Ivy League, you know, colorful adjective, that get referenced throughout that's who he should be, you know, based on who his parents want him to be. Or, you know, the preppy, like, that's the category that, you know, we would kind of place him in. And so the fact that he doesn't fit in there, I think for some people can be refreshing, or the fact that it doesn't always work out for certain segments of the population, you know, and that kind of stereotypical buildup. I think at the same time, we expect a lot of those things. So, like, fourth period, for example, was, well, what's the meeting with the parents? Like, it was getting built up to him and his family, you know, having this big discussion about, you know, or falling out, fight, whatever they want, as to how he, you know, gets from where he is to the institution, the facility that it's in, and we don't know. And I kind of go, it doesn't really matter with what Salary's trying to do.
I was just gonna say, I think it's refreshing in the sense that, like, well, we have a team narrator who is just so, like, right, like, he's so conversational and also very blunt at the same time. And I think that it's nice to have that to the point where it's not so much like All Quiet on the Western Front where it's like depression, but it's not like just romanticizing anything. It's just seeing some dark subjects and some like things.
And that's a good kind of comparison, the fact that Holden and Paul really wouldn't be that far apart, you know, in age. And if we were going in like today's world, it's certainly not politically correct, carefully worded phrases to avoid stigmas or stereotypes and things like that. And so getting a kind of unfiltered version of things doesn't mean it's the correct version. But it's something where you're kind of at least a little bit more aware of what other people think. Ethan, want to say?
For me, it's not that refreshing because I've seen my fair share of narrators sort of like, you know, and that might just be because like Catcher in the Rye inspired future words, but like to me, it's just sort of like the sarcastic narrator is something I see a lot. Like when I first read the book, I was thinking of Clockwork Orange.
Okay, yeah. And thankfully doesn't do exactly all the same stuff that Paul's the narrator in that one.
Yeah,
But, you know, like, I know I mentioned Perks of Being a Wallflower, or like, if you think of 1980s teen rebel movies, I would say Holden does tend to kind of be the founding father, so to speak, of that genre in a way. I don't know where you're at, but it's all fun. It's not charging right.
yeah, I know, it's that one when I plugged it in.
Have a good day.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep.